The fluorescent lights of Maple Diner had witnessed 1,000 stories, but none quite like the one unfolding on that crisp autumn afternoon. Sophia Carter wiped down the same spot on the counter for the third time, her hands trembling slightly. Not from exhaustion, though her double shift had left her feet screaming, but from the weight of anticipation. The diner's bell chimed with each new customer, and every ring sent a jolt through her spine. Outside Pine Ridge, Vermont displayed its small-town charm through the windows of the diner. Fiery maples lined Main Street, their crimson leaves cascading onto sidewalks where everyone knew everyone else, or thought they did. In towns like this, secrets hid in plain sight, masked behind polite smiles and casual conversation. The bell chimed again. Sophia's hand froze mid-wipe. The mug she'd been drying slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor in a cacophony that silenced the diner. Time slowed as ceramic shards scattered across the checkered tile. "I got it," she whispered, dropping to her knees, frantically gathering the pieces. But it wasn't the broken mug that concerned her. It was the heavy footsteps moving through the diner, deliberate and measured like a military march. The footsteps stopped. Black polished shoes appeared in her line of vision. "Sophia." The voice carried the weight of command of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Colonel William Carter stood tall in his pressed khakis and button-down shirt, his silver crew cut exactly the same length it had been during his 30 years of military service. At 63, his posture remained ramrod straight, shoulders squared, as if still wearing the uniform that had defined his life. "Dad?" Sophia managed, rising slowly, ceramic fragments clutched in her trembling palm. "I'm working." Before her father could respond, the bell chimed again. Through the window, she spotted the black Range Rover parking outside. Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something more complex. Gabriel Blackwood entered Maple Diner with his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, the same way they had every day for the past 3 weeks. At 42, Gabe carried himself with quiet confidence. 6'2", with salt and pepper hair at his temples that complemented piercing blue eyes. His Rolex Submariner caught the light as he guided Emma to their usual booth by the window. Unlike other wealthy men who'd passed through Pine Ridge, there was nothing ostentatious about him. The Tom Ford shirt he wore seemed almost incidental, like a man who dressed well out of habit rather than vanity. Emma skipped alongside her father, dark curls bouncing around her shoulders. She clutched a folder of drawings to her chest, her eyes lighting up when she spotted Sophia. "Miss Sophia," she called, waving enthusiastically. The colonel's eyes narrowed, tracking the interaction with military precision. He assessed Gabe Blackwood as one might evaluate a potential threat, noting the confident stride, the expensive watch, the way other patrons nodded in respect. "We'll talk later," the colonel said to Sophia, his voice lowered but not softened. 1800 hours. Don't be late this time." He turned sharply, offering a curt nod to Marion, the 55-year-old cook who'd emerged from the kitchen at the sound of breaking ceramic. Marion returned a cold stare, her history with the colonel evident in the tightness around her mouth. As her father pushed through the diner door, Sophia exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "You okay, honey?" Marion asked, taking the broken pieces from Sophia's hand. "Cut yourself." Sophia shook her head, though the truth was more complicated. Some wounds didn't bleed. "I'm fine," she replied automatically, the same answer she'd given for years. "Your usual Mr. Blackwood," she called, forcing brightness into her voice as she approached their booth. Gabe looked up, his expression shifting subtly as their eyes met. He'd witnessed the interaction with her father, and something in his gaze told her he'd understood more than most would. "Please," he nodded. "Coffee black for me, chocolate milk for the artist here." Emma beamed already, spreading colored pencils across the table. "I made you something," she announced, sliding a drawing toward Sophia. The image showed a princess with long, dark hair escaping from a castle tower. A dragon circled above, breathing fire, while the princess ran toward a forest where other figures waited with outstretched arms. "It's you," Emma explained matter-of-factly. "You're running to freedom." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. From the mouths of babes, as they said. How could this child see what she herself could barely acknowledge? "It's beautiful," she whispered, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Emma." As she turned to fetch their order, she caught Gabe watching her with an unreadable expression. No, not unreadable, understanding. In the kitchen, Marion handed her the coffee pot. "Your father's in rare form today." Sophia touched the antique pocket watch she always carried, a reflex action whenever anxiety crept in. Her mother's only gift, given days before the stroke that took her life when Sophia was 16. She never opened it anymore, couldn't bear to see the frozen hands marking the exact moment Her world had first begun to crumble. "He found out I missed Sunday dinner," she explained, "and I didn't answer 3 of his calls last night." "Because you were at the poetry reading in Burlington," Marion stated rather than asked. Few knew about Sophia's secret passion for writing her notebooks filled with verses she scribbled at 3 a.m. when insomnia claimed her. Sophia nodded, surprised Marion remembered. "It went late and then I turned my phone off to drive home." "Good for you," Marion said firmly. "You're 32 years old, Sophia, not a teenage girl with a curfew." But in Colonel William Carter's mind, his daughter would always need his protection, his guidance, his control. As Sophia delivered the drinks to the Blackwoods table, she overheard Gabe on his phone, his voice lowered. "The Phoenix parameters need adjustment. The identification rates for early PTSD markers are still too low." He paused, noticing Sophia. "I'll call you back." He slipped the phone into his pocket, offering an apologetic smile. Work never ends even in paradise. "Phoenix?" Sophia asked before she could stop herself. Something flickered in Gabe's eyes. Caution, perhaps. "Just a project. Boring tech stuff." Emma rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair only 7-year-olds could master. "Daddy helps soldiers who are sad. Like your dad, but Daddy uses computers instead of yelling." "Emma," Gabe said gently, though his expression tightened. "Remember what we discussed about privacy?" "Sorry," Emma murmured, returning to her drawing. Sophia's curiosity piqued. What kind of project involved soldiers? Was it military technology? Defense contracts? The possibilities swirled as she refilled coffee cups around the diner, stealing glances at the enigmatic father and daughter. 2 hours later, the afternoon rush had slowed to a trickle of customers. Sophia wiped down the counter again, this time with actual purpose. She'd almost managed to push thoughts of her father's impending conversation from her mind when the bell chimed with deliberate force. Colonel Carter had returned, and this time he wore his dress uniform medals gleaming under fluorescent lights. Every customer in the diner straightened reflexively, the military bearing, commanding respect even from civilians. Gabe and Emma remained at their booth, Emma now working on homework while Gabe typed on his laptop. Both looked up at the colonel's entrance, Emma's pencil freezing mid-equation. "Sophia," the colonel announced, his voice carrying across the diner. "A word, now." It wasn't a request. In 30 years of military service, Colonel William Carter had never made requests. He issued orders and expected compliance. Sophia set down her rag heart, hammering against her ribs. "Dad, I'm still on shift for another hour. I've already spoken with your manager. He understands this is a family matter." Family matter. The euphemism hung in the air, heavy with implication. In the colonel's world, family matters took precedence over everything, and family matters were addressed with the same tactical precision he'd once applied to military operations. "I don't think this is the place." Sophia tried again, painfully aware of the eyes watching them, of Emma's curious gaze, of Gabe's sudden stillness. "I didn't raise my daughter to be disrespectful," the colonel continued, his volume increasing. "I didn't raise you to ignore your family obligations, or to disregard basic courtesy like returning phone calls." Heat crept up Sophia's neck, spreading across her cheeks. Shame. The colonel's most effective weapon. She'd spent a lifetime trying to avoid it, to be the perfect daughter he demanded, and still found herself standing in its spotlight. "With all due respect, sir," a calm voice interrupted. "Perhaps this conversation would be better continued privately." Gabe had risen from his booth, his height matching the colonel's. He didn't approach, didn't make any aggressive move yet. His presence altered the dynamics of the confrontation instantly. He stood with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to being heard without raising his voice. The colonel turned slowly, eyes narrowing as he fully registered Gabe for the first time. "And you are?" "Gabriel Blackwood," he replied evenly. "My daughter and I are regular customers here." He gestured toward Emma, who watched wide-eyed from their booth. "I'm sure Ms. Carter would appreciate discussing family matters away from her workplace." The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. The colonel's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his tanned skin. "I don't recall asking for your input, Mr. Blackwood." "You didn't," Gabe acknowledged without a hint of apology. "But I believe in treating service workers with the same respect I'd want for myself or my daughter." The words hung between them, neither man backing down. Two alphas recognizing each other across a crowded room, assessing strengths and weaknesses with practiced precision. "Daddy," Emma's small voice broke the tension. She'd left her seat moving to stand beside her father. Her eyes darted between the colonel and Sophia, brow furrowed with concern. Is that man going to hurt her? The innocent question sliced through the standoff like a scalpel. Several patrons gasped quietly. Marion emerged from the kitchen dish towel clutched in white-knuckled hands. The colonel blinked, momentarily thrown by the child's perception. In those few words, Emma had seen what the colonel refused to acknowledge, that his protection had become oppression, that his love had transformed into control. "Young lady," the colonel began, his tone softening marginally. "Adults sometimes have disagreements that can seem unpleasant, but I would never harm my daughter." Physically, perhaps, that was true. But the damage inflicted by years of psychological control ran deeper than any visible wound. "Then why does she look scared?" Emma persisted, her guileless question cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Sophia couldn't remember the last time someone had noticed her fear, much less named it aloud. She'd become so adept at masking it, at presenting the composed daughter the colonel expected. "Emma," Gabe placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Sometimes families have complicated feelings, but you're right to be concerned when someone seems upset." He met the colonel's gaze steadily. "Sir, I respect your military service. My own father served in Desert Storm, but this isn't a battlefield and your daughter isn't under your command." The colonel's eyes flashed dangerously. For a moment, Sophia feared he might actually strike Gabe. Instead, he turned back to her, voice lowered, but still audible to those nearby. 1800 hours, Sophia, at your apartment. We clearly have more to discuss than I thought." His gaze flickered toward Gabe and Emma, "including your choice of company." With that, he executed a perfect military turn and marched from the diner, leaving a vacuum of silence in his wake. The bell chimed with finality as the door swung shut behind him. Sophia gripped the counter, knuckles white, fighting the urge to crumple to the floor. Years of conditioning made her want to run after him, to apologize, to do anything to prevent the greater storm she knew would come. But her feet remained rooted to the spot, her body refusing to follow the patterns of the past. "I need to—" She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen, then fled through the swinging doors, away from the curious stares and whispered conversations already blooming throughout the diner. In the relative safety of the kitchen, she pressed her back against the cool metal refrigerator, gulping air that refused to fill her lungs properly. "Easy now," Marion soothed, approaching cautiously like one might a wounded animal. "Just breathe, honey." "I shouldn't have let him leave like that," Sophia gasped. "He'll be worse later. So much worse." Marion's weathered hands gripped Sophia's shoulders firmly. "Listen to me. That man may be your father, but he doesn't own you. He never did." "You don't understand," Sophia whispered. "When Mom died, I understood Elizabeth better than most." Marion cut in, her voice suddenly fierce. "We were friends before you were born, before the colonel became what he is now." Sophia's head snapped up. Her father rarely permitted her mother's name to be spoken, as if Elizabeth Carter had become merely a rank, the colonel's wife, rather than a woman with her own identity. "You knew my mom," Marion nodded slowly. "We were nursing school classmates. Before she met your father, before she gave up her career to follow him from base to base." This was new information, precious glimpses of the woman Sophia had lost too young. Her memories of her mother had faded over the years, deliberately obscured by the colonel's refusal to discuss her, except as a saint, a perfect military wife, whose memory Sophia could never live up to. "She was so bright," Marion continued, her eyes distant with memory. "Brilliant, really. Top of our class. She could have been a doctor if she'd wanted." "He never told me that," Sophia whispered. "There's a lot he never told you," Marion replied, a shadow crossing her face. "But now's not the time. You've got about 4 hours before you need to face him again. Question is, what are you going to do with them?" For the first time in her adult life, Sophia genuinely considered not showing up at the appointed time. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I can't just—" "Yes, you can," Marion insisted. "You're 32 years old, Sophia. You've been supporting yourself for years, even with him taking half your paycheck for rent at a house you don't even live in. It's time to start living your own life." Before Sophia could respond, the kitchen door swung open. Pete, the diner's manager, poked his balding head through the gap. "Sophia, the guy with the kid in booth 5 is asking for you, says it's important." Gathering her composure, Sophia smoothed her apron and nodded. "I'll be right there." Marion caught her arm as she passed. "Remember, you have choices, more than you think." Returning to the dining area, Sophia found the diner had mostly emptied following the confrontation. Just a couple of regulars remained at the counter, and Gabe and Emma still at their booth. Emma was back to her drawing, but Gabe watched Sophia's approach with concern etched across his features. "I'm so sorry about that." Sophia began, professional mask firmly back in place. "Can I get you anything else?" "Please sit down for a minute." Gabe gestured to the empty seat across from him. "If you can." Sophia hesitated, glancing toward Pete, who nodded his permission. Reluctantly, she slid into the booth, hands folded tightly in her lap. I need to apologize, she started again. No, Gabe interrupted gently. You don't. You have nothing to apologize for. Emma looked up, pushing a new drawing across the table. This one showed three figures holding hands, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman with dark hair. Above them arched a rainbow in vivid colors. This is us, Emma announced proudly. You're pretty. Despite everything, Sophia felt a smile tug at her lips. Thank you, Emma. That's beautiful. Gabe studied his daughter with evident love before returning his attention to Sophia. Look, I don't usually get involved in other people's business, but what I saw today, he paused, choosing his words carefully. It reminded me of something I've seen before. Sophia stiffened. My father loves me. He's just controlling, Gabe finished for her. Believe me, I recognize the signs. My late wife, Rachel, Emma's mother, she grew up with a father very similar to yours. This revelation caught Sophia off guard. She'd known Gabe was a widower. The whole town had buzzed with that information when he'd purchased the old Whitaker estate on Maple Hill. But she hadn't known anything about his wife's background. How did she... Sophia trailed off, unsure how to ask about another woman's escape from a situation so similar to her own. Handle it, Gabe supplied. Not easily, it took years. By the time I met her, she'd already established physical distance, moved to a different state. But the psychological control he'd established, that took much longer to break. Emma, sensing the serious turn in conversation, had returned to her homework, though Sophia suspected she was still listening. Children always did. The thing about control masquerading as protection, Gabe continued quietly, is that it's insidious. It makes you doubt yourself, makes you think you need the very thing that's hurting you. Sophia's hand instinctively moved to the pocket watch she always carried. Her mother's voice echoed from memory. Time moves forward, Sophia. Never let anyone hold you in place. I don't know what to do, she admitted, the words barely audible. I've tried setting boundaries before, but he just steamrolls right over them. Gabe nodded in understanding. Rachel used to say trying to set boundaries with her father was like trying to use a paper shield against a tank. The analogy was so perfect that Sophia almost laughed, though there was nothing funny about the situation. What changed for her? She asked, desperate for a roadmap, for proof that escape was possible. Gabe's expression softened with memory. She finally realized something crucial one day. Her father's love, real as it might have been, had become so twisted by his need for control that it was no longer recognizable as love. And more importantly, she realized that she deserved better. Emma looked up from her homework. Mommy said that mean people only win if you let them think they're right all the time. Gabe's smile held pride and sadness in equal measure. That's right, sweetheart. Your mom was very wise. Turning back to Sophia, his expression grew serious again. I know we don't know each other well, but I'd like to help if you'll let me. Sophia's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Pulling it out, she saw 3 text messages from her father, each more demanding than the last. I expect you to be prepared to explain yourself tonight. Your behavior today was embarrassing and disrespectful. Confirm you'll be at your apartment at 1800 hours, not a request. Her hand trembled as she set the phone on the table screen down. He wants me at my apartment at 6, she said, voice hollow. He has a key. Gabe's eyebrows rose slightly. Your father has a key to your apartment. For emergencies. Sophia explained automatically, though she couldn't remember the last time there had been an actual emergency requiring his entry. He pays half my rent. With your money, Gabe observed quietly. Sophia looked up sharply. How did you know that? Educated guess, he replied. Control often extends to finances. Rachel's father did the same thing, charged her rent for living in his house long after she'd moved out. The parallels were uncanny and disturbing. Sophia had always thought her situation unique, had always made excuses for her father's behavior. The war, her mother's death, his concern for her safety. But hearing another story so similar to her own made the abnormality of her situation impossible to ignore. What if I wasn't there at 6, she asked suddenly, the question bursting forth before she could reconsider. What if you weren't? Gabe echoed encouragement in his tone. He'd be furious, Sophia said automatically. He'd probably call the police, report me missing. And what would the police do when they found a 32-year-old woman had simply chosen not to go home immediately after work? The question hung between them, challenging years of conditioned responses. In truth, there was nothing legally her father could do, no actual authority he held over her. His power existed solely in her acceptance of it. He'd find me eventually, she said, but with less conviction now. Pine Ridge isn't that big. True, Gabe acknowledged. But perhaps the point isn't to hide forever. Perhaps it's just to demonstrate that you are your own person making your own choices. Emma, who had been quietly listening while pretending not to look up again. You could come to our house. We have extra rooms, and Daddy makes really good spaghetti. Emma, Gabe said gently, though his eyes held amusement, Miss Carter probably needs some space to think. That's very sweet, Emma, Sophia smiled at the girl. But your dad's right. This is something I need to figure out for myself. Where would you go? Gabe asked. If you decided not to be at your apartment at 6, Sophia considered the question. In all her years in Pine Ridge, she'd created remarkably few connections. The Colonel had always found reasons why potential friends were unsuitable, reasons why social engagements were unnecessary. She had Marion, of course, but staying with her seemed too obvious. There's a bookstore in Burlington, she said, finally surprising herself with the answer. Open until 9. I've always wanted to spend more time there, but your father thinks fiction is a waste of time. Gabe finished again with that uncanny perception. Sophia nodded. How did you know? Rachel's father had the same opinion. Said novels filled heads with nonsense and unrealistic expectations. A weight seemed to lift from Sophia's shoulders with each similarity Gabe identified. Each parallel confirmed that she wasn't crazy, that her discomfort with her father's behavior was justified. Then perhaps that's exactly where you should be at 6 o'clock, Gabe suggested, surrounded by stories and possibilities rather than judgments and limitations. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. A small rebellion, to be sure, but meaningful in its deliberate nature. He'll still be waiting when I get home, she pointed out. Probably, Gabe agreed, but on your timeline, not his, and that distinction matters. Her phone buzzed again, another message from the Colonel demanding confirmation. Sophia stared at the device as if it were a venomous snake. Turn it off, Gabe suggested quietly. What? Turn your phone off, just for tonight. Give yourself permission to be unreachable. The suggestion was radical, almost unthinkable. Her father had instilled in her the belief that an unanswered phone was a sign of danger or disrespect. There was no middle ground. I can't, she whispered. You can, Gabe contradicted gently. The question is whether you're ready to. Emma, watching the exchange with solemn eyes, suddenly piped up again. My mommy used to say that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even though you're scared. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Sophia looked at the child, then at Gabe, then down at her phone where yet another demanding message had appeared. With trembling fingers, she did something she had never done before when her father was trying to reach her. She turned the phone completely off. The screen went black, and with it the Colonel's voice went silent. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, like surfacing after being underwater too long. Brave, Emma approved with a sage nod. Sophia felt tears threaten and blinked them back. I should get back to work. Gabe nodded in understanding. Of course, but Sophia... He waited until she met his gaze. If you need anything, we're here. No strings, no expectations. It seemed impossible that this man she barely knew could offer such genuine support, could see so clearly what she herself had struggled to acknowledge for years. Thank you, she managed, voice thick with emotion, for seeing what no one else has. As she returned to her duties, Sophia felt different, lighter somehow, despite the knowledge that eventually she would have to face her father's wrath. For the first time in memory, she had made a choice solely for herself, contrary to the Colonel's explicit instructions. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. By 5:30, Gabe and Emma had left, but not before Emma presented her with one last drawing, a door standing open with light streaming through. It's for when you're scared, the child explained seriously. Remember, there's always a door. At 5:45, Sophia hung up her apron, collected her purse, and headed for her car. The logical part of her brain screamed that she was making a mistake, that defying her father would only make things worse. But another voice, one that sounded remarkably like her mother's, whispered, It's time, Sophia. It's time. As she pulled out of the diner parking lot, she caught sight of Marion watching from the window, offering an encouraging nod. Instead of turning right toward her apartment, where the Colonel undoubtedly already waited, she turned left toward the highway that would take her to Burlington, and the bookstore filled with worlds her father had always forbidden. With each mile that passed, her hand steadied on the wheel, the antique pocket watch pressed against her side, still holding time frozen at her mother's passing. Perhaps someday she would be strong enough to open it again, to let time resume its forward motion in all aspects of her life. For now, this small act of defiance was enough. One page turned in what she hoped might become a new chapter. Her father would be furious. There would be consequences, harsh ones likely. But for the first time in her adult life, Sophia Carter was exactly where she chose to be, not where she was ordered to be. Freedom she was discovering tasted like possibility. The Burlington Literary Corner welcomed Sophia with the comforting scent of paper and possibility. Shelves rose from floor to ceiling, a fortress of stories her father had deemed frivolous. Colonel William Carter believed fiction created unrealistic expectations. Only history books and military biographies earned his approval. Real men and real battles, he'd insist. Fantasies was for the weak-minded. Yet as Sophia ran her fingers along leather spines and glossy paperbacks, weakness was the furthest thing from her mind. Her pulse still raced adrenaline from her small rebellion coursing through her veins. 6 o'clock had come and gone. For the first time in her adult life, she had directly defied her father's orders. She wandered to the poetry section, drawn to words that expressed what she'd never been permitted to voice. A leather-bound journal caught her eye, simple, elegant with cream pages, awaiting impression. On impulse, she purchased it along with a collection of Mary Oliver poems. Small treasures, modest declarations of independence. The elderly shopkeeper smiled as he wrapped her purchases in brown paper. "First time here. First time staying," Sophia answered, surprising herself with the honesty. "Usually I just rush through." "Books aren't meant to be rushed," he replied, wisdom in the creases around his eyes. "They're meant to be lived in like comfortable homes." Comfortable homes. The phrase followed her as she settled into a worn armchair in the reading nook. Her apartment had never felt like home, just another space where her father's influence penetrated walls and locked doors. The memory surfaced unbidden. 16-year-old Sophia diary, clutched to her chest, facing her father's thunderous expression. "Nonsense," he'd declared, ripping pages filled with teenage poetry and dreams. "This is how delusions start. You'll focus on your studies instead." Just 2 months after her mother's death, 2 months after Elizabeth Carter collapsed in their kitchen, blood vessel bursting in her brain after years of walking on eggshells of perfect military wife performance. The colonel had disposed of most of Elizabeth's possessions within weeks' efficiency, in grief as in all things. Only the pocket watch remained her mother's inheritance, passed to Sophia with whispered words, "Time moves forward, Sophia. Never let anyone hold you in place." Words the colonel never heard. Words Sophia had buried as deeply as her desires. Her reverie broke when her phone remained silent in her purse. Still powered off, still blissfully disconnected from the barrage of messages undoubtedly awaiting her. Freedom tasted sweet, but fear lingered on her tongue. The inevitable confrontation loomed. By 9 o'clock, the bookstore closed. Reality could no longer be postponed. With leaden limbs, Sophia drove back to Pine Ridge, her new books beside her like small shields against the coming storm. The lights in her apartment building burned bright against the Vermont darkness. As she parked, a familiar silhouette caught her attention. Her father's military-issue SUV sat in the visitor's spot exactly as she'd expected. What she hadn't expected was the colonel himself sitting rigidly on the steps leading to her second-floor apartment. Even in the dim exterior lighting, his posture radiated fury contained only by military discipline. Sophia considered driving away again. But postponing the inevitable would only increase its severity. Drawing a steadying breath, she stepped from her car. 8 hours and 26 minutes, Colonel Carter announced without preamble, consulting his watch with deliberate precision. "That's how long your phone has been unreachable. That's how long I've been waiting for my only daughter to show basic respect for her father's concern." The carefully constructed speech told her he'd been rehearsing building his case like preparing for battle. Sophia clutched her package of books, suddenly aware they would become evidence in her trial. "I needed some time," she managed, voice steadier than expected. The colonel stood descending 3 steps with measured control. "Time," he repeated the words sharp as rifle report. "While I imagine car accidents, abductions, God knows what else. I'm 32 years old, Dad, not 16. Age doesn't grant immunity from danger, Sophia Elizabeth." Full name deployment, a warning shot across her bow, particularly when you're demonstrating such poor judgment lately. He gestured toward her package. "What's that?" The question carried accusations. What secret? What contraband? What evidence of disobedience? "Books," she admitted, clutching them tighter. "Poetry and a journal." Something dangerous flickered in her father's eyes. More wasteful nonsense encouraged by that man and his daughter, no doubt. "This has nothing to do with Gabe or Emma." "Gabe?" The colonel seized on the familiar address. "Already on first-name basis with a man you barely know?" a man with questionable motives and a classified military background. Sophia blinked in surprise. What are you talking about? The colonel moved closer, voice lowering, as it always did when imparting what he considered critical intelligence. Gabriel Blackwood, former Navy SEAL Special Operations in Afghanistan, developed some kind of psychological profiling technology for the military before going private sector. Made his millions selling software to people he used to call brothers. The precision of information confirmed he'd conducted reconnaissance, called in favors from military contacts. The realization sent ice through Sophia's veins. When the colonel investigated someone, it never ended well for the subject. Why would you investigate a customer? Because my daughter has suddenly become defiant after his appearance in town. Because his behavior toward you suggests ulterior motives. The colonel straightened, confidence in his assessment absolute. Men like Blackwood target vulnerable women. Your mother would have seen through him immediately. The mention of her mother ignited something in Sophia's chest, not fear but unexpected anger. Don't bring mom into this. You don't get to use her as a weapon. The colonel's expression hardened. Upstairs, now. This conversation doesn't need an audience. Indeed, lights had flickered on in neighboring apartments, curtains twitching with small-town curiosity. Sophia weighed her options and found them limited. She ascended the stairs, the colonel following closely, his presence heavy behind her. At her door, she fumbled with keys, hands trembling slightly. The lock turned, but the door remained shut. It's stuck again, she muttered, embarrassed by the building's poor maintenance. Without warning, the colonel placed one hand flat against the door and pushed. The door swung open with a splintering crack. Horror washed through Sophia as she registered what had happened. Her father had broken her new lock. Dad, what are you doing? The colonel stepped past her into the apartment, surveying the small space with military assessment. The lock was changed, he stated, accusation evident. You changed the locks without informing me. I didn't, Sophia protested, following him inside. The building manager must have. Her voice died as she saw her apartment. Everything was different, subtle but unmistakable changes. Books, rearranged papers, sorted kitchen implements, aligned with military precision. The space had been searched. You went through my things, she whispered, violation washing over her. The colonel turned unrepentant. I was concerned when you didn't arrive as instructed. I conducted a welfare check. A welfare check doesn't involve reorganizing my kitchen. I found this, he countered, producing her poetry notebook from his jacket pocket, hidden between your mattress and box spring. Childish secrets, Sophia, at your age. The familiar blue notebook, her private thoughts, her midnight confessions, her only true freedom, now contaminated by his intrusion. Pages had been folded, marked with small tabs. He'd not only found it, he'd studied it like enemy intelligence. That's private, she managed, heart hammering against her ribs. Nothing is private when safety is concerned, he replied, opening the notebook to a marked page. Listen to this dramatic nonsense. The walls speak his language, echo his commands, even when he's gone. I exist in translation, interpreting silence for threats. This isn't poetry, Sophia. These are the delusions of someone becoming unstable. Shame and rage battled within her chest. Those words, written at 3 a.m. after one of his surprise inspections of her apartment, had been her only outlet, her silent scream into paper darkness. Give it back, she demanded, reaching for the notebook. The colonel held it away, continuing as if she hadn't spoken. And this mother's watch stops time frozen at her escape. Did she know? Did she choose? What exactly are you implying about your mother's death? Nothing, it's just poetry, just feelings. Your mother's aneurysm was not an escape, Sophia. It was a medical tragedy that took a devoted wife and mother. This disrespects her memory. Something inside Sophia snapped, a lifetime of careful compliance fracturing in a single moment. No, Dad. You disrespect her memory by turning her into a saint instead of a woman, by using her death to control me for 16 years, by making her so perfect I could never measure up. The colonel stepped back as if physically struck. In 32 years, Sophia had never raised her voice to him, never directly challenged his narrative. His face flushed dark crimson, a vein pulsing at his temple. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, voice dangerously quiet. Your mother was everything to me. She was everything to me too, but she was human, Dad. She had dreams you made her give up. She had opinions you overrode. She had a life before you that you never let her talk about. The colonel's hand tightened on the notebook, knuckles whitening. For one terrible moment, Sophia thought he might strike her, something he had never done for all his psychological control. Instead, with deliberate precision, he tore the notebook in half, then quarters pages fluttering to the floor like wounded birds. "This poison stops now," he declared, the colonel fully present, the father nowhere to be found. "You will cease contact with Blackwood and his daughter. You will answer your phone when I call. You will attend Sunday dinner as you always have. This rebellion ends tonight, Sophia." Tears blurred her vision, but something steel-like had formed in her spine, a core of resistance, forged in the fire of his destruction. "I love you, Dad," she said quietly, each word deliberate. "But love isn't a chain. If you keep this up, you'll lose both me and my love forever." For a brief moment, something flickered across his face, recognition perhaps, or the ghost of uncertainty. Then his expression hardened again, resolve cementing. "You'll thank me someday for protecting you from your own poor judgment, just as you've thanked me before." With military precision, he stepped around the scattered pages of her poetry, moving toward the door. "I expect you at Sunday dinner, 1600 hours. We'll discuss your attitude adjustment then." The door closed behind him with quiet finality, more damning than any slam. Sophia stood motionless in the center of her violated apartment, surrounded by the confetti of her destroyed dreams. Only then did she notice movement outside her window, the silhouette of a car pulling away from across the street. Someone had been watching the entire confrontation. Sleep evaded Sophia that night. She gathered the torn pages of her notebook, piecing them together like a puzzle that could never be whole again. By dawn, she had reached a decision that terrified and exhilarated her. She needed a place to stay somewhere. Her father couldn't reach her with his key, his expectations, his suffocating version of love. Her shift at Maple Diner began at 10. Marion took one look at her face and pulled her into the kitchen away from curious eyes. "He found you last night," the older woman stated rather than asked. Sophia nodded, exhaustion bone deep. "He searched my apartment, Marion. He tore up my poetry notebook." Marion's weathered face hardened with anger. "That man needs more help than anyone can give him." "Did he hurt you?" "Not physically," Sophia clarified, though the emotional wounds ran deep. "But I can't go back there. Not with the door broken, not with him having a key." "Stay with me," Marion offered immediately. "My spare room isn't fancy, but it has a door that locks." Sophia considered the generous offer. But the colonel knew Marion's address, knew their friendship. It would be the first place he'd look. "Thank you, but I need somewhere he wouldn't expect." The diner bell chimed, signaling new customers. Sophia composed herself, smoothed her apron, and returned to the dining area. The morning passed in a blur of coffee refills and breakfast orders, her mind elsewhere weighing limited options. At precisely noon, the bell chimed again. Gabriel Blackwood entered alone without Emma, who would be in school. He took his usual booth, but his expression lacked its customary calm. Tension lined his shoulders as he scanned the diner, visibly relaxing when he spotted Sophia. She approached his table, coffee pot in hand, professional mask firmly in place, despite the turmoil beneath. "Your usual Mr. Blackwood." "Gabe," he reminded her gently. "And yes, coffee would be great. Do you have a minute to join me?" She glanced around the half-empty diner, then at Marion, who nodded encouragement from behind the counter. "Just for a minute," Sophia agreed, sliding into the booth across from him after filling his cup. "You went through with it," he observed, studying her with those perceptive blue eyes. "You weren't home at 6. "How did you know?" A shadow crossed his face. "Because your father came looking for me afterward." Ice formed in Sophia's stomach. "What, where?" "Outside Emma's school yesterday evening. She had a science club meeting. We were leaving when he approached us in the parking lot." Gabe's voice remained measured, but his jaw tightened at the memory. "He was quite direct in his opinions about my involvement in your decisions." Horror washed through her. "He confronted you in front of Emma. I'm so sorry, I never thought he'd drag you into this." "Don't apologize for his actions," Gabe countered firmly. Emma was startled, but fine. "I've explained that some adults have big emotions they don't manage well." "What did he say to you?" Sophia asked, dreading the answer. Gabe took a deliberate sip of coffee before responding. "He suggested I have ulterior motives for befriending you. He mentioned my military background and implied he has connections who could make problems for my current projects." The casual way he relayed this information belied its seriousness. Colonel Carter, wielding his military connections as weapons, was no empty threat. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Sophia said, voice barely above a whisper. "He's always done this, investigated anyone who gets close to me, found ways to drive them away." "I'm not easily driven," Gabe replied with quiet confidence. "And I don't appreciate his approach to Emma." Something in his tone made Sophia look up sharply. Behind Gabe's controlled expression lurked something dangerous, not aggression, but the absolute resolve of a man who had faced real battles and would not be intimidated by psychological warfare. What did he say to her? Nothing directly inappropriate, Gabe clarified. But he asked her questions about me, about our home life. Questions no stranger should ask a child. The implication was clear. The colonel had attempted to gather intelligence from a 7-year-old. Anger flared in Sophia's chest, hot and unfamiliar. He broke into my apartment last night. She revealed, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. Changed the lock, but he broke the door open. He searched everything, found my poetry notebook, and destroyed it. Gabe's expression darkened further, his hand tightening around his coffee mug. That crosses several legal lines, Sophia. Breaking and entering, destruction of property. He doesn't see it that way. In his mind, he was conducting a welfare check because I wasn't answering my phone. She laughed, the sound hollow and brittle. 32 years old, and he thinks a few hours without contact justifies breaking down my door. What will you do now? Gabe asked after a thoughtful pause. I can't go back there, she admitted. Not with the door broken, not knowing he feels entitled to search my things. Gabe nodded as if he had anticipated this conclusion. I have a suggestion if you're open to it. I'm running low on options, Sophia acknowledged. I own a small caretaker's cottage on my property, he explained. About a quarter-mile from the main house, completely separate with its own driveway. I've been renovating it to sell eventually, but it's perfectly habitable right now. New lock, security system, private. The offer stunned her. You'd let me stay there? As long as you need, Gabe confirmed. No strings, no expectations. Emma and I would be nearby if you needed anything, but you'd have complete privacy. Suspicion flickered briefly, her father's warnings about Gabe's ulterior motives, casting momentary shadows. But she pushed them aside, recognizing them as the colonel's voice in her head, not her own judgment. Why would you do this for me? You barely know me. Gabe considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. Because when Rachel was trying to break free from her father's control, someone did the same for her. Sometimes a moment of kindness makes all the difference between breaking free and giving up. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Outside the diner window, normal life continued. People walking dogs, picking up mail. Living unextraordinary moments in freedom Sophia had never fully known. I can't pay much, she began, practical concerns surfacing. Not looking for payment, he interrupted gently. Consider it temporary sanctuary while you figure out your next steps. The offer represented everything she needed: safety, distance, time to think. Yet accepting help remained difficult, conditioned as she was to view independence as a threat and assistance as a trap. I'd need to get some things from my apartment, she said, edging toward acceptance. I can go with you, Gabe offered. Or Marion could. You shouldn't have to face another confrontation alone. Before Sophia could respond, the diner door chimed again. The sound froze her blood, the particular force applied to the door, the rhythm of footsteps that followed. Colonel William Carter had returned. He entered like a general inspecting enemy territory, ramrod straight in his casual clothes that nonetheless resembled a uniform in their precision. His gaze swept the diner, locking onto Sophia and Gabe with laser focus. Gabe tensed, subtly positioning himself to stand if necessary. But the colonel's approach held military restraint, his expression controlled despite the fury evident in his eyes. Sophia, he acknowledged, deliberately ignoring Gabe. A word. I'm working, Dad, she replied, summoning calm she didn't feel. This won't take long, he insisted, then finally addressed Gabe with cold formality. Mr. Blackwood, I believe you've involved yourself enough in family matters. Your daughter is entitled to conversation with whomever she chooses. Gabe responded evenly, not rising to the provocation. The colonel's jaw tightened, but he maintained his facade of reasonableness. Sophia, I've come to apologize for the unfortunate incident with your door. I've spoken to your building manager. Repairs will be completed today. The unexpected apology delivered in front of witnesses was tactical, rather than sincere damage control, to maintain his image as the concerned father, rather than the controlling force Sophia knew. Thank you, she managed, wary of his true purpose. From his jacket, the colonel withdrew a silver-framed photograph. Sophia instantly recognized her mother on their last family vacation before the aneurysm claimed her. Elizabeth Carter smiled at the camera, arms around 16-year-old Sophia, the colonel standing proudly beside them. I thought you might want this, he said, placing it carefully on the table. Your mother would want you to have it, especially now when you seem to be forgetting the values she instilled in you. The manipulation was masterful, invoking her mother's memory, presenting himself as the generous father in front of Gabe and the diner patrons, while simultaneously delivering his message, remember your place. Remember who you belong to. Marion appeared behind the colonel, coffee pot in hand like a potential weapon. Colonel Carter, she greeted, voice cool as Vermont winter. Surprising to see you here twice in 24 hours. Coffee. No thank you, Marion, he replied with forced politeness. Just a quick visit. Funny thing about visits, Marion continued undeterred, they're supposed to be welcome, like your visits to Sophia's apartment. The colonel's expression hardened. My relationship with my daughter is hardly your concern. Maybe not, Marion acknowledged, but Elizabeth was my friend long before she was your wife, and I promised her I'd look out for Sophia. Something dangerous flickered in the colonel's eyes. You overstepped, Marion. No, Colonel. For the first time in 16 years, I'm finally stepping up. Marion set down the coffee pot, standing straighter despite her shorter stature. Elizabeth was planning to leave you before she died. The words fell like bombs in the quiet diner. Sophia gasped audibly, her world tilting on its axis. The colonel went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that precedes violence. That's a lie, he said, each word precisely controlled. She'd consulted a lawyer, Marion continued relentlessly. She was saving money, making plans. Your control was crushing her just like it's crushing Sophia now. The colonel moved so quickly that several patrons flinched. But instead of confronting Marion, he slammed his fist into the wall beside him, where the same photograph of Elizabeth hung in the diner's local faces collection. Glass shattered, raining onto the linoleum floor. Several customers stood abruptly, reaching for phones. In that moment, the carefully constructed facade of Colonel William Carter, decorated veteran, respected community member, concerned father, cracked wide open. What showed through was something darker, a glimpse of the rage he typically contained behind military discipline. Dad, Sophia whispered, shocked by the public display so contrary to his controlled image. The colonel looked at his daughter, then at his bleeding knuckles, comprehension dawning at what he'd revealed. Without another word, he turned and marched from the diner, leaving destruction and stunned silence behind. Call Pete, Marion instructed another waitress, referring to the diner's owner. Tell him what happened and that I'll pay for the damage. Sophia remained frozen, staring at the shattered photograph on the floor, her mother's smile visible through fractured glass. The symbolism was too perfect, too painful. Sophia! Gabe's voice broke through her shock, his hand hovering near hers without touching. Are you all right? The question seemed absurd, given what had just transpired, yet his steady presence anchored her as the diner erupted in whispers and movement around them. Was it true, she asked Marion, who had knelt to gather larger glass shards. About Mom. Marion straightened, sorrow and determination mixing in her weathered features. Yes, she'd made an appointment with a lawyer in Burlington. Told me 3 days before. She didn't need to finish, 3 days before the aneurysm. 3 days before all possibilities ended. Why didn't you tell me before 16 years of wondering, of accepting the colonel's sanitized version of her mother? I promised her I'd keep it quiet unless you needed to know, Marion explained. She wanted to protect you from choosing sides. And after she died, you were so young, so vulnerable. The colonel was your only parent left. The revelation shifted everything, her mother's final words about time moving forward, taking on new significance. Elizabeth Carter hadn't been philosophizing about life. She'd been giving her daughter permission to escape what she herself never managed to flee. I need to go, Sophia said, suddenly overwhelmed by connections forming like lightning strikes in her mind. Marion, can you cover my shift? The older woman nodded without hesitation. Go. Do what you need to do. Sophia turned to Gabe, decision crystallizing through the chaos. That cottage offer, is it still available? Absolutely, he confirmed, relief evident in his expression. I can take you there now if you'd like. I'd need to get some things from my apartment first. I'll come with you, he said, not a question, but a statement of support. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to Sophia's apartment building in Gabe's Range Rover. The colonel's SUV was noticeably absent, but caution guided their movements nonetheless. Sophia led the way upstairs, where she found her door propped closed but unlocked the frame, splintered from the previous night's forced entry. Inside the apartment felt different, no longer a sanctuary, however limited, but a violated space. Sophia moved efficiently, gathering essentials into 2 suitcases while Gabe kept watch near the damaged door. Just clothes and personal items, she explained deliberately, leaving furniture and household goods. I can't take anything he's given me. Understandable. Gabe nodded, respecting her process without commentary. As she packed, her hand brushed against her mother's pocket watch, still nestled in her purse. With sudden resolve, she withdrew it, holding the tarnished silver case in her palm. My mother gave me this the week before she died, she explained, though Gabe hadn't asked. I've never opened it since that day. It's frozen at the exact time of her death. Gabe moved closer, studying the watch without touching it. Sometimes we freeze time when moving forward feels too painful, he observed quietly. Or when someone makes moving forward impossible. Sophia added, returning the watch to her purse with new understanding. Her mother had planned escape. Now she would complete what Elizabeth Carter couldn't. 30 minutes later, they turned onto a hidden driveway, marked only by a discrete number not visible from the main road leading to Gabe's larger property. Trees lined the gravel path, opening to reveal a charming cottage with freshly painted blue shutters. Simple, private, secure. It's not fancy, Gabe cautioned as he unlocked the door. Still needs some cosmetic work inside, but the essentials all function. The cottage proved larger than Sophia had expected, an open-plan living area and kitchen bathroom, with new fixtures and a bedroom with windows overlooking a small garden. Everything smelled of fresh paint and possibility. This is perfect, she breathed, setting down her suitcases just inside the door. The security system is active, Gabe explained, indicating a keypad near the entrance. Code is 1290, but you can change it to whatever you prefer. My number is programmed as the emergency contact, but again, you can change that. The thought put into her safety, her autonomy, struck Sophia deeply. Such consideration felt foreign after years of the Colonel's controlling version of protection. I don't know how to thank you, she began. No need, Gabe assured her. Emma and I are at the main house if you need anything, but otherwise this space is completely yours for as long as you need it. The generosity overwhelmed her, not just the physical shelter, but the emotional space to breathe, to choose to begin healing. Won't this cause problems with my father? She asked, guilt surfacing, despite her resolve. He already threatened your projects, your work. Gabe's expression hardened slightly, not with anger at her question, but with determination. Let me worry about that. Colonel Carter isn't the only one with connections, and Project Phoenix is more important than he realizes. What exactly is Project Phoenix? Sophia asked, curiosity overriding restraint. I overheard you mention it at the diner. For a moment, Gabe seemed to weigh his response, professional discretion, battling with emerging trust. It's a system for early detection of PTSD and trauma responses in veterans, he finally explained, using behavioral markers and AI to identify those at highest risk of self-harm or violence before they reach crisis points. Understanding dawned like sunrise. That's why you recognize my father's behavior so quickly. It's literally your work. Gabe nodded, expression somber. Your father displays classic signs of untreated, combat-related PTSD channeled into controlling behavior. I've seen it hundreds of times in developing this system. Could your project help him? The question surprised even Sophia herself, compassion surfacing despite everything. Potentially, if he were willing, Gabe acknowledged. But the first step with any intervention is recognizing there's a problem. The Colonel doesn't seem to have reached that point. As if summoned by their conversation, Sophia's newly purchased cell phone chimed with a text message. She'd changed numbers, but Marion had the new contact information. The message, however, wasn't from Marion. Emma, Dad says I can invite you for dinner tonight. I made pictures for your new house. Can you come, please? The simple invitation, clearly typed by a 7-year-old with her father's permission, brought unexpected tears to Sophia's eyes. Connection without obligation, invitation without demand, the opposite of everything she'd known with her father. Emma's invited me to dinner, she explained, showing Gabe the message. His smile was genuine. She's been talking about you nonstop, but absolutely no pressure. I know you might want some space. Actually, Sophia found herself saying, dinner sounds perfect. The afternoon stretched before her hours to settle in, to arrange her belongings in a space that was temporarily hers, to begin imagining a life not dominated by the Colonel's expectations. Tomorrow would bring complications, decisions about her job, her apartment, her relationship with her father. But for now, for these precious hours, Sophia Carter had something she'd never fully experienced before. Freedom to choose her own path forward. Outside the cottage window, a deer emerged from the forest edge, cautious, but determined as it stepped into the clearing. Sophia watched it test the air, ready to retreat at the first sign of danger, yet brave enough to venture beyond the safety of dense trees. She understood the feeling perfectly. Emma's enthusiasm proved infectious, her small hand clutching Sophia's as she led the tour of the Blackwood home. The main house stood in stark contrast to the cottage, a restored colonial farmhouse with modern amenities seamlessly integrated into historical architecture. Yet despite its grandeur, warmth permeated every room. "This is the kitchen where Daddy makes pancakes on Saturdays," Emma announced, pulling Sophia through a chef's kitchen with professional-grade appliances. "And this is where we have movie nights, and this is where I do my homework, and this is where Daddy works sometimes, but he's not supposed to because it's the living room." Gabe followed behind them, amusement softening his features. Emma maybe let Sophia catch her breath before the complete tour. Dinner awaited them on the patio, simple spaghetti with garlic bread as promised. Sophia couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a meal, not overshadowed by her father's rigid expectations. Colonel Carter's dinners operated with military precision, discussion topics approved in advance, posture corrected with a glance, opinions measured before expressed. Here Emma dominated conversation with 7-year-old logic and observations uninhibited by adult constraints. Gabe listened to his daughter with genuine interest, encouraging her thoughts without directing them. The dynamic between father and daughter revealed everything Sophia needed to know about Gabriel Blackwood, his wealth and accomplishments secondary to his excellence as a father. "Miss Sophia, do you like your cottage?" Emma asked, twirling spaghetti with focused determination. "Very much," Sophia smiled. "It's the perfect size for me. Dad says you can stay as long as you want." "Right, Dad." Gabe nodded, shooting Sophia a reassuring glance. "Absolutely, no pressure or timelines. We put flowers in there today," Emma announced proudly, "while you were getting your stuff. And I made you pictures for the walls because new houses need art." "That's very thoughtful," Sophia replied, touched by the child's consideration. "Mom always said that houses need flowers and art to become homes," Emma continued matter-of-factly. "And everyone needs a home." The simple wisdom struck Sophia deeply. Home, she'd lived in her apartment for 3 years, yet it had never truly been hers, just another extension of her father's domain, subject to his inspection and approval. After dinner, while Gabe cleaned up, Emma presented Sophia with a folder containing her artwork, colorful drawings of landscapes, animals, and 3 stick figures that clearly represented Emma, Gabe, and Sophia. One particular drawing caught Sophia's attention, a castle with a young woman walking through an open gate. "That's you," Emma explained, "walking out of the castle where the dragon lives." "Dragon?" Sophia asked, though she understood the metaphor with painful clarity. Emma nodded solemnly. "The scary dragon that makes you sad. Dad says sometimes people get trapped with dragons that other people can't see, but the brave princess always escapes." Sophia met Gabe's gaze over Emma's head, finding empathy without pity. He'd obviously explained her situation to Emma in terms the child could understand without frightening her. "Your dad is very wise," Sophia said, carefully folding the drawing. "I'll hang this one in my bedroom." Later, after Emma went to bed, Sophia and Gabe sat on the porch Vermont night, unfolding around them. Crickets provided nature's symphony while fireflies performed their luminescent dance across the lawn. The peaceful setting belied the turmoil of recent days. "Thank you for dinner," Sophia said, cradling a mug of tea between her palms. "And for everything else. I know taking in a virtual stranger with a controlling father isn't exactly without risk." "You're not a stranger," Gabe corrected gently. "Not anymore." Silence settled between them, comfortable rather than awkward. Sophia found herself studying his profile in the porch light, the strong jawline softened by expression, the silver threading through dark hair at his temples, the small scar near his right eyebrow that hinted at stories untold. "Your father came by today?" Gabe said finally, his voice carefully neutral. Sophia nearly dropped her mug. "Here when?" "This afternoon, while Emma was at her piano lesson. He was civil. Said he wanted to discuss his concerns about you man to man." Ice formed in Sophia's stomach. "What did he say?" "He's concerned you're having some kind of breakdown. Cited your poetry as evidence your sudden, irrational behavior." Gabe's tone remained, and even though his knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. "He mentioned my military background implied he knows people who could look into Project Phoenix." The threat, however, veiled hung in the night air. Colonel William Carter never made idle warnings. "I'm so sorry," Sophia whispered, guilt coursing through her. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. He destroys anyone who helps me stand up to him." "Sophia," Gabe turns to face her directly. "Your father doesn't frighten me. I've faced far worse than an angry colonel with a control problem. You don't understand. When I was engaged to Daniel 4 years ago, my father called his boss and suddenly Daniel was transferred across the country. When my college roommate encouraged me to study abroad, she mysteriously lost her scholarship. He finds leverage, uses it without hesitation." Gabe's expression remained untroubled. "I appreciate the warning, but my position is different. I'm not financially vulnerable. My company is mine entirely, no board to pressure. And unlike those others, I understand exactly what we're dealing with. What do you mean? PTSD is manifesting as hypercontrol. Gabe explained, professional assessment evident. Your father experienced trauma that destroyed his sense of safety. Controlling his environment, especially you, became his coping mechanism. The more you assert independence, the more his anxiety spikes, triggering what he perceives as protective responses. The clinical analysis struck Sophia with its accuracy and compassion, not excusing her father's behavior, but explaining it in terms beyond simple cruelty. How do you know all this? Gabe's eyes clouded momentarily with something that looked like painful memory. Because I've seen it hundreds of times. Because I almost went down that path myself after Afghanistan. This revelation surprised her. Gabe had mentioned his military service casually, but never the impact. What happened? Our unit was ambushed. Bad intelligence, worse timing. I lost my best friend, watched him die while I couldn't reach him. His voice remained steady, but Sophia sensed the control required. When I came home, I became obsessed with controlling everything around me. Schedules, routines, checking locks 4 times every night. Couldn't sleep unless I'd inspected every room, every window. How did you get past it? Rachel, he said simply. She recognized what was happening and got me into proper treatment. EMDR therapy medication initially. It saved me from becoming exactly like your father, someone who needs absolute control to function. Understanding bloomed like night flowers in Sophia's mind. Project Phoenix wasn't just business for Gabe. It was personal salvation extended outward. And that's what Project Phoenix does. Identifies veterans with PTSD before they reach crisis. Gabe nodded, setting his mug aside. The VA system is overwhelmed. Veterans wait months for appointments, years for comprehensive treatment. Meanwhile, suicide rates climb. Phoenix uses AI to analyze speech patterns, social media, even public security footage to identify veterans showing escalation markers. Then we connect them with immediate resources, peer support, treatment options. That's incredible, Sophia said, genuinely moved. Is that what you were doing before the technology you developed for the military? A shadow crossed Gabe's face. The original system was more surveillance-oriented. I left when I realized they wanted to use it for monitoring rather than helping. Phoenix is my redemption project, same technology, but for saving lives instead of tracking them. Their conversation continued into the night, sharing histories and hopes with unexpected ease. Gabe spoke of Rachel's illness, the devastation of watching her fade while trying to be strong for Emma. Sophia revealed more about her poetry, her abandoned nursing studies, the dreams she'd tucked away to keep peace with her father. By the time she returned to the cottage, something had shifted between them, trust cemented through shared vulnerability. The small house welcomed her with fresh flowers in mason jars and Emma's artwork already taped to the refrigerator. For the first time in memory, Sophia slept without checking her phone, without anxiety about missed calls, without planning the next day's careful navigation of her father's moods. She awoke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily disoriented before remembering her new sanctuary. The cottage felt different in morning light, possibilities illuminated where shadows had lurked. She opened her notebook, the new one purchased in Burlington, and words flowed freely, unfiltered by fear of discovery or judgment. 3 days passed in unexpected peace. Sophia returned to work at the diner where customers tactfully avoided mentioning the colonel's outburst, though speculations simmered beneath polite inquiries about her well-being. She maintained her shifts, established a routine between the diner and cottage, and began researching nursing programs that offered online courses. On the 4th morning, Marion pulled her aside during the breakfast rush, concern etched into her weathered features. "Your father's been asking questions," she said quietly, "trying to figure out where you're staying." Sophia's stomach tightened. "Has he been in?" "Not since the incident, but he's called Pete twice asking if you've quit demanding your schedule." "What did Pete say?" "Told him employee information is confidential," Marion replied with grim satisfaction. "Pete's got backbone when pushed." "But honey, the colonel's not giving up. He was at the post office yesterday, at the bank this morning. He's tracking you methodically." The familiar anxiety resurfaced, though tempered now by nascent independence. "I knew this peace wouldn't last." "Maybe it doesn't have to end," Marion suggested, glancing around to ensure their privacy. "Maybe it's time to set terms instead of hiding." The suggestion struck Sophia as both terrifying and necessary. She'd escaped physically, but true freedom would require confronting the colonel, directly establishing boundaries he could not breach without consequences. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted. Marion squeezed her shoulder gently. No one's ever ready to stand up to someone like your father. You just do it anyway. The diner bell chimed, ending their conversation as Sophia returned to her duties. But the seed had been planted, growing throughout her shift until decision crystallized into resolve. She would face her father, but on ground of her choosing, with preparation and support. That evening, she discussed strategy with Gabe over dinner at the cottage, Emma occupied with a movie in the main house. I need to confront him, Sophia explained, pacing the small living area. Set clear boundaries before he escalates further. Gabe listened, thoughtfully, respect evident in his attention. Have you considered what you want that relationship to look like going forward? The question gave her pause. She'd focused so intently on escape that she hadn't contemplated what came after. I don't want to cut him off completely, she realized. He's my only family, but I need him to recognize I'm an adult with my own life, not an extension of his. That's a reasonable position, Gabe affirmed. The question is whether he's capable of accepting those terms. I won't know until I try, Sophia replied, but I can't keep hiding forever. They settled on a neutral location, the town park, public enough for safety, but private enough for honest conversation. Sophia would control the timing, the duration, the terms of engagement. Gabe would remain nearby but unseen, respecting her independence while providing backup if needed. Sophia composed her message carefully, then hit send before courage failed. Dad, I'm ready to talk. Memorial Park, 2 p.m. tomorrow by the gazebo. Just you, just me, 1 hour. These are my terms. The response came almost immediately. Confirmed, 1400 hours. Sleep proved elusive that night, anxiety battling resolve as Sophia rehearsed what needed saying. By morning, exhaustion had honed her thoughts to crystalline clarity. This conversation would determine her future, not just with her father, but with herself. Memorial Park welcomed her with autumn splendor, maples blazing red and gold against azure sky. Sophia arrived early, claiming a bench with sightlines to all approaches. She dressed deliberately, professional slacks and sweater. Nothing the colonel had purchased, nothing he could criticize as inappropriate. He arrived with military punctuality, precisely at 200 p.m. Colonel William Carter had also chosen his appearance carefully, civilian clothes rather than the dress uniform he often wore to intimidate, though his posture remained unmistakably military. The cut on his knuckles from the diner incident had scabbed over, a visual reminder of uncharacteristic loss of control. Sophia, he greeted, remaining standing as she stayed seated, a subtle power dynamic she recognized immediately. Thank you for coming, Dad. His eyes assessed her with tactical precision. You look tired. The observation, criticism veiled as concern, represented everything she was fighting against. Once she would have apologized, explained, justified. Instead, she maintained eye contact without defensiveness. I have things to say and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that? Surprise flickered across his face at her directness. He gave a curt nod, military man accustomed to clear parameters. I love you. Sophia began the declaration, genuine despite everything. You're my father and nothing changes that. But I cannot continue our relationship as it's been. I'm 32 years old. I make my own decisions. I choose where I live, who I see, what I do with my life. The colonel's jaw tightened, but he maintained silence as agreed. Marion told me about Mom. Sophia continued, watching his expression darken. That she was planning to leave. That she'd contacted a lawyer. I believe it, Dad, because she recognized what I'm only now seeing. Your protection became control. Your love became possession. That's not, he began, then stopped himself, honoring their agreement with visible effort. I'm not cutting you out of my life, Sophia assured him, softening her tone slightly. But there must be new rules. You don't get keys to my home. You don't drop by unannounced. You don't investigate my friends or interfere with my work. You don't make demands about my time or activities. She withdrew her mother's pocket watch from her purse, holding it between them like a talisman. Mom gave me this the week before she died. Told me time moves forward and not to let anyone hold me in place. I think she was trying to save me from what she couldn't escape herself. For the first time in Sophia's memory, uncertainty flickered across her father's features. Not anger, not disappointment, but genuine vulnerability, a crack in the colonel's armor. May I speak now? He asked, voice uncharacteristically subdued. Sophia nodded, steeling herself for manipulation, for anger, thinly veiled for the strategies he'd employed throughout her life. Instead, the colonel lowered himself onto the bench beside her knees, cracking slightly. a sudden reminder of his age, his mortality. He stared at his hands, the commanding officer momentarily absent. When your mother died, he began slowly, I lost the only person who made sense of the world after Vietnam. Elizabeth, she knew how to reach me when the memories hit, knew what to say when nightmares came. Without her, I had only my training, my structure, and you so young, so vulnerable. He looked up at the brilliant autumn canopy eyes tracking a falling leaf's journey. I convinced myself that control equaled protection, that if I managed every variable in your life, nothing bad would touch you, the way it touched my men in Da Nang. The reference to his combat experience startled Sophia. The colonel rarely mentioned Vietnam, specifically preferring generalized references to service and duty. What happened there? She asked gently. His gaze remained fixed on middle distance, seeing not Vermont trees but Southeast Asian jungle. Ambush, bad intelligence. 8 men under my command died while I survived. Spent 3 days trapped with their bodies before extraction arrived. Understanding bloomed with painful clarity. The colonel's need for constant contact, his panic when she was unreachable, his hypervigilance about potential threats. Not mere control, but traumatized response to profound loss. I'm sorry that happened to you, Sophia said sincerely. But Dad, I can't be the solution to your trauma. It's not fair to either of us. He nodded slowly, surprising her with his apparent receptiveness. The incident at the diner, it wasn't my finest moment. No, she agreed, but it was honest. Maybe the most honest you've been in years. Silence stretched between them. Autumn wind rustling through trees, distant children's laughter from the playground, providing counterpoint to their gravity. This man Blackwood, the colonel said finally. I've looked into him. Sophia tensed, prepared to defend Gabe against whatever accusations followed. His military record is exemplary, her father continued unexpectedly. Afghanistan 2 tours. Silver Star for valor during an ambush near Kandahar. Honorable discharge after injury. She hadn't known about the Silver Star or injury. Gabe had mentioned Afghanistan, but minimized his own service, typical of the genuine heroes she'd encountered through her father's military connections. Then you know he's not who you accused him of being, she replied carefully. The colonel's expression tightened. I know his credentials are legitimate. His intentions remain unproven. His intentions are to help a woman escape an unhealthy situation, the same situation his late wife endured. So he told you. So I've witnessed, Sophia countered. He's offered shelter without expectation, support without control. He listens more than he speaks. He respects boundaries you've spent a lifetime ignoring. The comparison struck home, flinching across her father's features before military discipline reasserted control. And what of his Project Phoenix? The colonel's intelligence gathering remained thorough despite everything, using surveillance technology on veterans without consent. Sophia shook her head. That's not what Phoenix does. It identifies veterans in crisis to connect them with immediate help before they hurt themselves or others. It saves lives. Using methods developed for military intelligence, her father pressed. Repurposed for healing rather than harm, she corrected. The same technology that tracked enemy combatants now tracks suicide warning signs. Something shifted in the colonel's expression, a spark of genuine interest beyond tactical advantage. Does it work? Gabe says they have reduced veteran suicide rates by 30% in their pilot regions. They're seeking funding for national expansion. The colonel absorbed this information with the thoughtfulness of a man who'd lost comrades, not just to combat, but to the aftermath, the silent casualties who survive war, only to lose the subsequent battle with themselves. Many of my men from Vietnam, he began, then stopped, swallowing hard. We lost more after coming home than we did in country. A bridge appeared where Sophia had expected only walls, common ground. In concern for veterans, for the damaged warriors the colonel understood better than anyone. Project Phoenix might have helped them, she suggested gently. Perhaps, he conceded, then squared his shoulders, the vulnerable moment passing. But that's not why we're here. No, Sophia agreed, refocusing on their primary conversation. We're here to establish new terms for our relationship. You believe I've been controlling. His tone suggested the word tasted foreign on his tongue. I know you have been, Sophia corrected firmly, breaking into my apartment, destroying my poetry, investigating my friends, demanding my schedule, treating me like a wayward recruit rather than an adult daughter. The blunt assessment hung between them, undeniable in its accuracy. The colonel had faced enemy fire with less visible discomfort than his daughter's truth. I've only wanted to protect you, he insisted, though with less conviction than previously. Protection without respect isn't protection, Dad. It's possession. Her words struck with precision she'd learned from him. Identify weakness, apply pressure, advance, position. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Tactical, mind-seeking parameters, acceptable conditions? A relationship between equals. Sophia replied simply. I'll keep in regular contact, weekly calls, monthly dinners when things settle. But my home remains private, my friendships, my choice, my career path, my decision. No surveillance, no background checks, no interference. The colonel processed these terms with military assessment. And if I find these conditions unacceptable, Sophia had anticipated this question, prepared her hardest answer. Then we won't have a relationship at all. The ultimatum landed with devastating impact. For all his faults, the colonel genuinely loved his daughter, perhaps too possessively, too controllingly, but with sincere devotion nonetheless. The prospect of losing her entirely struck deeper than any battlefield wound. I see, he said quietly. I don't want that, Sophia hastened to add. You're my only family, but I will not live under your command any longer. The colonel stood abruptly, pacing 3 steps away before turning back. Military mind analyzing options, calculating odds, assessing terrain. I need time to consider your proposal, he said finally. Take all the time you need, Sophia replied, rising from the bench. I'm not going anywhere. She turned to leave. Their hour nearly concluded when his voice stopped her. Your mother, he said, vulnerability cracking through. Was she really planning to leave? Sophia faced her father, witnessing rare uncertainty in the man who'd always projected absolute confidence. According to Marion, yes. Pain etched across his features, not the anger she'd expected, but genuine grief for what he'd never recognized until too late. Would she have? The question emerged barely above whisper. I don't know, Dad, Sophia answered honestly. But the fact that she was considering it should tell you something important. She left him standing amid falling leaves, autumn's gentle descent, mirroring the slow crumbling of barriers long maintained. Whether breakthrough or temporary vulnerability remained to be seen, but seeds had been planted in ground previously impenetrable. Gabe waited at the cottage, respect for her independence, evident in his decision not to intercept her on the path from the park. Emma had created a welcome home banner, colorful letters spelling Brave Princess across the small living room. The child's unwavering support touched Sophia deeply, another anchor in her evolving definition of family. How did it go? Gabe asked, handing her a cup of tea as Emma arranged colored pencils at the kitchen table, seemingly occupied but undoubtedly listening. Better than I expected, worse than I hoped, Sophia replied honestly. He actually listened. But whether anything changes, she shrugged, the outcome uncertain. Change takes time, Gabe observed, especially for men like your father, who've spent decades building fortifications around their vulnerabilities. He asked about Project Phoenix, Sophia revealed. Seemed genuinely interested beyond just gathering intelligence on you. Gabe's eyebrows rose slightly. That's unexpected. He lost men to suicide after Vietnam. I think it resonated more than he wanted to admit. Emma looked up from her drawing. Is your dad a soldier like Daddy was? Yes, Sophia smiled gently. A very brave one from a long time ago. Daddy says soldiers sometimes get hurts we can't see, Emma stated with children's directness. Is your dad hurt inside? The question's innocence belied its profound insight. Yes, Emma, I think he is. Then he needs help from doctors who fix inside hurts, the child concluded simply, like Daddy had. Gabe and Sophia exchanged glances over Emma's head, mutual understanding without words. The child's straightforward assessment cut through decades of complexity to the core truth. Colonel William Carter needed professional help, not just boundary setting. You know, Gabe said thoughtfully, Phoenix is launching a support group specifically for Vietnam-era veterans, separate from the surveillance program, just peer counseling and resources. You think he'd consider it? Skepticism colored Sophia's tone. Men like your father rarely accept help for themselves, Gabe acknowledged, but framed as helping other veterans through his experience that might bypass his defenses. The strategy held promise, appealing to the colonel's lifelong commitment to his men rather than acknowledging his own needs. Sophia filed the possibility away for future consideration when dust from today's confrontation had settled. 3 days passed without word from her father. Sophia maintained her routine shifts at the diner, evenings often spent with Gabe and Emma, nights in her cottage sanctuary where poetry flourished in freedom. She submitted 3 poems to a small literary journal, a step unimaginable weeks earlier. On the 4th day, an envelope arrived at the diner, her name written in the colonel's precise handwriting. Inside, she found her mother's wedding ring on a simple silver chain, accompanied by a handwritten note. Sophia, your mother wore this for 19 years. I've carried it in my wallet since her death. Time you should have it. She would be proud of your courage. I am attempting to be as well. Your terms are accepted. My number remains the same when you're ready, Dad. The gesture, understated yet profound from a man who rarely communicated in subtleties, brought unexpected tears. Not capitulation, but recognition. The first acknowledgement of her adulthood, her autonomy, her right to self-determination. She showed the note to Gabe that evening as they walked the property's perimeter, autumn stars emerging in Vermont's darkening sky. This is significant, he observed, returning the note carefully. For a man like your father, this represents major concession. Do you think he means it? Doubt lingered despite hope. I think he's trying, Gabe replied thoughtfully. Whether he can maintain it when tested remains to be seen. They continued walking, comfortable silence enveloping them. Their relationship had evolved gradually, naturally, friendship deepening without pressure or expectation. Something warmer than gratitude, more profound than attraction, had developed between them, though neither had yet named it directly. I've been thinking about nursing school again, Sophia ventured, changing subjects. Burlington College has an accelerated program for people with previous credits. Gabe's smile reflected genuine support. You'd be an excellent nurse, compassionate, observant, resilient. It would mean staying in the area, she added, watching his reaction peripherally, at least for the duration of the program. The cottage is yours as long as you need, he assured her, though Emma would insist you're still required for Tuesday movie nights regardless. Laughter came easily now, another freedom reclaimed from years of careful self-monitoring. As they rounded the final curve toward the cottage, Sophia spotted an unfamiliar vehicle parked near her door, a modest sedan rather than military-issue SUV, but her pulse quickened nonetheless. The colonel stood beside the car, civilian clothes, emphasizing his deliberate choice of neutral presentation. Not a commanding officer, just a father visiting his daughter. When he spotted them approaching, he straightened reflexively, but remained beside his vehicle, respecting boundaries by not approaching the cottage directly. Your father, Gabe observed unnecessarily. Yes, Sophia confirmed, uncertain whether to feel apprehension or hope. Would you mind? I'll head back to the house. Gabe finished for her, understanding her need for privacy. Call if you need anything. She approached her father alone, noting the effort evident in his restrained posture, his patient waiting rather than immediate advance. Dad, she greeted cautiously, this is a surprise. I should have called first, he acknowledged, revealing awareness of the new boundaries. I can come back another time if this isn't convenient. The consideration, so unlike his previous demands, suggested genuine effort rather than tactical compliance. It's fine, she assured him, unlocking the cottage door. Would you like to come in? He hesitated, visibly uncomfortable with unfamiliar territory, then nodded once. Thank you. The cottage revealed much about Sophia's evolving identity. Emma's artwork, brightening walls, books arranged by preference rather than military precision, poetry volumes prominently displayed. The colonel surveyed it all without comment, though his expression softened at Emma's crayon portrait of Sophia displayed on the refrigerator. It's not much, Sophia said, suddenly self-conscious about the modest space. It suits you, her father replied unexpectedly. It feels like you. The observation, simple yet profound, acknowledged what he'd never previously recognized, that Sophia existed independently of his vision for her, with preferences and personality distinctly her own. Coffee, she offered, seeking normalcy and ritual. Please. As she prepared the drinks, the colonel remained standing, military-bearing evident despite civilian clothing. When she handed him the mug, their fingers brushed briefly, the contact bridging physical and emotional distance. I've been thinking about our conversation. He began, cradling the mug without drinking. About your terms. Sophia braced herself, uncertain whether backsliding or progress would follow. I spoke with a VA counselor yesterday. He continued, each word clearly difficult. First time since 1972. The revelation stunned her. Colonel William Carter had rejected psychiatric evaluation throughout her lifetime, dismissing PTSD as weakness, therapy as indulgence. What made you decide to go? She asked carefully. He set his untouched coffee aside, military precision in the placement. Your friend Blackwood's project, I looked into it more thoroughly. The statistics are compelling. And the counselor suggested I might benefit from regular sessions. His discomfort with the admission was palpable. Apparently 30 years of hypervigilance and control issues qualify as symptoms rather than character traits. The self-awareness in his statement, however reluctant, represented monumental shift. Sophia approached cautiously emotional terrain as uncertain as combat zones. "I'm proud of you for going," she said gently. That took courage. The word reached him where others might have failed. Courage, the quality he valued above all others, recognized by the daughter he'd tried to mold in his image. "There's a support group," he continued, each admission visibly difficult. "Vietnam veterans specifically, twice monthly at the VA Center in Burlington. Will you go?" He squared his shoulders, combat veteran, facing incoming fire. "First meeting is Thursday. I've committed to 3 sessions minimum." Pride swelled unexpectedly in Sophia's chest, not for grand heroics, but for this small, essential step toward healing. For all his faults, the colonel had never lacked bravery. Now he directed it toward his greatest fear, his own vulnerability. "I'd like to hear how it goes," she offered. "Maybe Sunday dinner, next week at the diner, not your house." The invitation, bounded by clear parameters initiated on her terms, represented the new relationship they were tentatively constructing. The colonel recognized its significance immediately. 1,700 hours acceptable. Sophia smiled gently. 5 o'clock works fine, Dad." He nodded once mission parameters established. Then with uncharacteristic hesitation, he withdrew an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I found these when cleaning out my filing cabinet," he explained, extending it toward her. "Thought you should have them." Inside, Sophia discovered photographs. She'd never seen her mother as a nursing student, white uniform, crisp against dark hair, stethoscope around her neck, smile radiant with purpose. Elizabeth Carter, before marriage, before motherhood, captured in her independent identity. "She was top of her class," the colonel said quietly. "Could have been head nurse anywhere. Princeton Medical Center offered her a position before we married." "I never knew," Sophia whispered, studying her mother's confident posture, her purposeful expression. "I never told you," her father corrected, "because acknowledging what she gave up made me accountable for taking it." The admission, stark, honest, painfully self-aware, revealed more genuine change than flowery apologies ever could. Colonel William Carter was beginning to see himself clearly, perhaps for the first time since Vietnam. "Thank you for these," Sophia said sincerely, carefully returning the precious photos to their envelope. He nodded once, military acknowledgement of mission completed. "I should go. You have your life to attend to." The statement recognized her independence without resentment, another small victory in their evolving dynamic. Sophia walked him to his car, autumn evening, settling around the property as stars emerged overhead. "Dad," she called as he opened his door, "I meant what I said in the park. I don't want to lose you from my life. I just need to live it on my own terms." He paused, framed in twilight, at the commanding officer momentarily absent. "I'm beginning to understand the difference," he admitted. "It may take time to fully implement." "We have time," Sophia assured him, "and I have patience." As his taillights disappeared down the driveway, Gabe emerged from the shadows of the main house path, respecting her privacy while ensuring her safety. Their eyes met across the darkening yard, understanding flowing between them without words. Freedom, Sophia was discovering, wasn't absence of connection, but authenticity within it. Not isolation, but the power to choose one's bonds, to determine their nature and limits. Her mother's watch remained in her pocket, but for the first time since Elizabeth's death, Sophia considered opening it, allowing time to resume its forward motion in all aspects of her life. Behind her, the cottage glowed with welcoming light, not permanent, perhaps, but perfectly suited to this moment of transition. Before her stood a man who recognized her strength rather than sought to direct it. And within her chest beat a heart finally reclaiming its natural rhythm, no longer keeping military time. The night embraced them all, the healing colonel, the supportive neighbor, the emerging woman, as Vermont stars testified to possibilities vast and numerous as themselves. Sophia Carter, poet and survivor, nurse-to-be, and daughter on new terms, stepped forward into the life that had awaited her all along. Freedom, she discovered, tasted like courage.